All right. Hi, everybody at Apex Hours. Thank you very much for having me on today. I'm really excited to be here and do this presentation to you, the 5 pillars of a successful DevOps process. My name is Jack McCurdy. I am a named account executive here at Gearset. I've worked with Gearset and in the DevOps space for the last 2 years. And my day-to-day job is speaking to healthcare and life science companies and financial service companies, helping them evaluate Gearset as a tool to help them with their DevOps processes and get them on board, ramped up, and achieving the business goals that they set themselves. Gearset, we have been making admins and developers, release managers, and various people in senior management's lives a little bit better ever since 2016. So as a company, we've grown to just shy of over 100 since then. We serve over 1,000 companies across the US, the UK, Europe, APAC, and as such are the leading DevOps platform for Salesforce, offering end-to-end release management solutions for the platform. So the agenda today, we're going to look at DevOps and Salesforce, a little bit of history about DevOps for the Salesforce platform itself. We're going to, of course, look at the 5 pillars of DevOps success, what that makes up. And we're also going to look at building your success roadmap, what that looks like and how you can get towards DevOps maturity. And then to finish, we're going to give you a little bit of a look at the Gearset app, a little bit of a walk around, nothing too in-depth, just a little something to give you a little bit of food for thought. So Salesforce and DevOps, and what happens to click not code? So everybody knows and is familiar that Salesforce's development hypotheses and strategy has always been clicks not code. So why are we now talking about DevOps, a traditional coding environment concept? So over the last 5 years, Salesforce as a platform has shifted towards a new future where it's becoming more important than ever for the developer experience to improve and to make way for better customization, easier building, and better features. Now, of course, Salesforce is making continual improvement in the clicks not code areas, flows are maturing and things like that. But custom code, Lightning web components, Apex classes, things that allow high levels of customization, those developers are yearning for a better experience that's more akin to what they might have previously transitioned from. As the shift is fairly recent, it means that as a software, Salesforce is slightly behind the DevOps trend, but it is getting there now, and that is why the topic is so prevalent today. So what is DevOps? Salesforce itself removes a lot of the complexity that you might find in DevOps on other platforms. So managing infrastructure, scalability, hosting, even testing, traditionally those are responsibilities of operations personnel and their chosen systems and tools. But all of that is handled by the Salesforce platform itself predominantly. So as a result, the remit of DevOps on Salesforce is a little bit different. So when we talk about DevOps in the Salesforce space, you can see a lot of different definitions that vary on what most people think is the most important aspects. But DevOps is about automating manual processes and making smaller, more regular and more reliable releases. It's more agile and it's a more responsive way of developing with a core focus on reliability and speed. But don't get bogged down in the definitions of or complexity of it. For most people, all Salesforce DevOps is simply put a better way of managing your deployments and releases in a way that's slightly more efficient and a bit better than the traditional methods, change sets, or using the CLI and things like Ant. So why is DevOps important and what do we stand to gain from it? So with DevOps, a higher frequency of new releases to production, shorter lead times for making changes and developing new features, fewer bugs, fewer service disruptions, and less poor quality code, faster restore times in the event of service outages, and good DevOps teams are enabled to restore in less than an hour. So there's a ton of benefit that can be gained from having a process that is efficient and aligned with best practice in terms of development. And Google's industry survey for 2019 showed that high-performing teams have that have adopted those DevOps practices deploy 208 times more frequently and make changes 106 times faster than the low performers. So ultimately, DevOps increases velocity significantly, letting you deliver value to your users more quickly. The best thing that your team can do on your DevOps journey is to start small. So DevOps is a journey, so you don't want to rush into things. You should pretty much just identify the smallest steps that you can and take those to move you forwards. Try and resist to take on every concept and every part of a outstanding DevOps process all at once. That just adds complexity to the process, and that's where we've seen where teams have had the most success in building DevOps processes is they start small and build on it and get the whole team involved. Start with the foundations, and that starting foundation is going to be version control. So version control is the core pillar and foundation of any good DevOps process, and that's what's going to allow your agile development. Absolutely everybody should be starting here. And it's also the future of the development on the platform. You look at things like Salesforce DevOps Center, which they are due to be releasing this year. All of that is about making it easy to interact with Git itself. With the, of course, DX, which has already happened, and with that movement and the shift to DevOps on the platform, it's clear that source control should always be the source of truth for your orgs. So what is it? So version control is also known as source control. It's a way of tracking changes made to files over time. So in the context of Salesforce, this means that you can track changes to your orgs and have multiple people working on the shape of your org independently without treading on each other's toes. Now, the reason that that's important is your production environment and your sandboxes, they're kind of living, breathing entities. They can always be amended, they can always be changed and adapted depending on the permissions of each person that has access to that environment. And what Git does is allows that to be broken up and isolate where you're going to be working and allowing you to work collaboratively on new features and effectively give you a timestamp of where your org is, and of course then be able to go back to any point in time and look at its development history from there. And there are a few options of systems that we could recommend to do that, but we recommend using a Git-based version control system as they're the best for handling conflicts and tracking those changes over the time, and are better integrated with DevOps tools like Gearset, of course. There are lots of version controls systems available. You just need to decide which one is going to be the best for you. GitHub, GitLab, Bitbucket, Azure are some of the most popular ones on the market as well. Ultimately, it's going to come down to what your company uses. Elsewhere in the company, you may find that you already have Bitbucket, Azure, GitHub live for other applications in the business. So you might just go with that one. Or it'll all depend on kind of your evaluation criteria, security, and all that kind of stuff. So we've made it really clear that version control is the foundation for DevOps, and I touched there on that last slide about some of the problems that it solves. So there are a few challenges with development for Salesforce, and firstly is that working in production. It's risky to make changes directly in production, as I'm sure you know, and version control lets us make our changes thoroughly and test them before pushing them to production by isolating them in those branches. Secondly, pushing changes between environments using tools like chain sets is a completely manual process. You've got to build your changes, often iterate on it a couple of times because you've missed dependencies and the like. So source control essentially lets us get ahead of that in real time before the release to production. So at release time, we know what our deployment will succeed. And thirdly, working in those shared orgs or pushing changes from lots of different sandboxes that people work independently on into production introduces the risk of treading on each other's toes, code clubbering, overwriting people's changes, and version control helps us address that. Really, really important to get this right, and what this will look like in each person's company and the branching strategy that you come up with will vary. On the subject of branching strategies, this is what source-driven development looks like. So this is a simple branching model, and we really recommend trying to get your team following this. It'll put you into transitioning to a mature stage where most teams sit. So it'll put you in a really strong position to be able to develop those more complex work streams. The defining characteristic of this model is that your version control is now the source of truth. This is where the strategy of your team should be aiming for, and this is what will underpin that whole DevOps process from the start. I should say that, like I mentioned, there are branching models options based on the size of your team, number of orgs. Git flow is another good one, but this is a good starter workflow to get you started. If this won't work for you, we're always happy to chat about the branching options that you have available to you, whether you're a customer or not. Just give us a shout, and we can help you identify what's going to be the best thing for you. So let me take you through the steps of this model. This model shows that there's a master branch that contains the latest state of our project and its full history. So this should always be deployable with no failing tests or broken features. So if you find that a test fails when you try to deploy something in master, then you should prioritize fixing that failure case as a team. When building out a new feature, you create a new feature branch off master. So all development takes place in that feature branch, isolated away from master. For example, if a dev is picking up a bug fix or starting on a new feature, you spin up a new branch off of that master and give it a descriptive name for the feature that you might be working on. And then you can work in that feature branch in isolation and make your changes in isolation so you're not interfering with that master code. These features should be broken up into as small deliverables as possible. You don't want to have branches that are sustained for a particularly long period of time because of other features being developed. We want these branches to live as long as possible, so there's less likelihood of merge conflicts when you look to pull that feature back into master and get it released. Once you've finished building in dev, you push those changes from your feature branch from your org using commits. So now that you can do your code review and make sure everything works, push it into testing and staging, for example. And once you're happy that that feature is ready, you can merge it back into master before its release. Master becomes the source of truth for your org. So instead of going straight from dev to production, you now move the changes from the master branch to your prod org, confident that the master is the latest copy of your work that's been tested and verified throughout your processes. So this feature branch model is awesome because it uses that branch to facilitate that independent stream of work, providing that isolation and encouraging the rigor of peer review when it comes to merging that code back into master or those features back into master. And it encourages teams to release regularly as possible rather than package features into larger releases, which is better for your end users, and it tightens the feedback cycle of the new things that you're developing. It takes the ceremony out of releasing as well, so you can release all the time, so it becomes second nature, and teams usually end up automating as much of this process as possible, which means it's much less error prone. Now, this can all be done with manual deployments, of course, but the next step in the next facet of DevOps is to automate this process with CI and CD. This is where deployments without any clicks, no manualness, and all scheduled and automated based on the development that's being done. So DevOps is all about the reliability of processes and speed, and we get reliability from the workflow that we've just discussed. So branching and source control, that handles that side of things for us. And then we get the speed from automation. So this is where you want a powerful CI/CD pipeline to come in, automated deployments that you set up in advance, and these can come in particularly handy at the last few stages of the model that we just saw. So you can set CI jobs to monitor your branches, so your master branch, and then automatically deploy that to production when changes are made, or validate a deployment to production when those changes have made, after, of course, they've all been tested. And it's much simpler than you might think. So you don't need to write a complicated script or anything like that. You can use a tool like Gearset to create your CI jobs in just a few clicks and still get all the good visibility that you need to be confident in that process. So the first part, as we just mentioned, is automating those deployments, and that'll speed things up for you as you save your preferences and it gets things moving down that pipeline. The CI/CD isn't just for deployments, it's also to validate changes, which I mentioned just a second ago. And that's really important to do regularly and ahead of time. So every time you make changes in a branch, those changes can be validated automatically so that you know it's going to be a successful deployment when it comes to deployment time. So this stops you from going down a path of building on top of something that's actually not deployable, if that happens to be the case, and if there is an issue that you catch it early. So with automated CI and CD, you can also do things like trigger unit testing, regression testing, when the job runs, and that's important too, which is why it's pillar number 3. So there are hundreds of different software tests that you can run, but what we're talking about specifically is a few key types of testing. So we've got unit testing, integration testing, system testing, sanity testing, smoke testing, interface testing, regression testing, and user acceptance testing, kind of as the main ones there. And this is what they're responsible for. So unit testing, these are checking that the Salesforce is happy with the changes that are being made. Your integration testing, do your changes work with the other services? User testing, are the changes working as expected for the users based on that story or the ticket that you've been working on? And usually those three types of testing are performed by these groups here. But you might find it varies in the team. You might wear different hats and all that kind of thing. So it does vary a little bit. And CI jobs can be used to automate parts of your testing processes. So you can use outbound webhooks to trigger other unit tests or bake that into other processes. The reason that this is important, and back to the principle of DevOps being reliable, testing is crucial to get right and for DevOps to be successful. Testing once is no good, so it must be baked into the process, because every time you change something, you don't know if it's going to work. So there's 2 things. You need to test early so you don't get weeks into a project before you test something. Make sure it's happening early in case that there are any issues. So when it comes to your merge or your deployment, you aren't hitting errors then. Test it as soon as you can. And you want to test often as well. So keeping testing regularly so you know where you are at each stage of your project and that it's performing as expected is super critical to having that tight feedback loop. Testing can also be automated depending on the tools that you use. So Gearset itself has automated unit testing in there as well. And you can use the tools like Provar and Selenium for regression, UI testing, and all of those are automated options and easily integrated with your release pipeline and DevOps processes. Again, it will depend on your team and your company and how much automation you want, but they're all available as options and recommended for best practice. Pillar 4 is often the most forgotten pillar in DevOps, but it is absolutely critical. Your Salesforce and business and customer data is absolutely imperative to how the business runs. So the cost of losing that data or a corruption incident is really steep. So you need to make sure that you have a reliable backup strategy in place. You never know what's going to happen. It could be unexpected data loss. It could be a disgruntled employee or ex-employee. Let's hope not, though. Or it could be something on the Salesforce end, like Parmageddon a couple of years ago. The point is, you just don't know what could happen at any time, and it's something critical to your business, so it can't be ignored. So if we look at this example where a user was trying to add 2,500 records under record type XYZ, loaded them without setting the record type, so they defaulted to ABC, and without really thinking about it, they decided to run a report of all ABC records and delete all of them. So 100,000 plus ABC records, and then reloaded 2,500 as XYZ. So nobody was informed until the next day when the counts were dramatically off, and that must have been one hell of a headache to solve. So nothing is malicious in this situation, but a simple accident, something simple like this can really cause some serious havoc and some serious data loss and business operational issues. So this is why having a backup strategy in place is going to be super important, so that we can get all 100,000 records back as we need to, and make sure that our business continuity isn't too severely effective. So just think about your own org. So what happens if something goes wrong? How many hours or even weeks to fix something like this story do you think it could possibly take if you don't have a tool to protect you? The benefits of backup solution are fairly self-explanatory. Firstly, protection of your data and your metadata. With a tool in place, regardless of the type of incident that you face, you'll know you'll your data will be safe, and a good tool will make sure that you have automated daily backups, maybe hourly backups, depending on the importance of some of the objects in your org. But the most important aspect is that you're going to have the ability to restore if something does go wrong, because there's no point in having a backup if you can't restore from it. So make sure when you are trialing solutions, if you don't already have one in place, that you test that part really well. The ability to restore is what gives you guaranteed business continuity, so it's worth paying for a solution that can do it properly. The other benefits are more control over your orgs, greater visibility into your data so that you can spot incidents quickly and get it resolved. But of course, if you're having, if you've got a good DevOps process in place, this should really be your safety net in case something does go wrong. Pillar number 5, the final pillar, is ultimately putting it all together. So we speak to lots of folks in the community who are put off by the term DevOps, or they see DevOps as a process and something that's not meant for them because it's too large and too complex for their team size or the stage that they're at. But that's absolutely not true. DevOps is for the whole team, and we speak to thousands of teams every day and help them with their processes. And it's the teams where every single member is brought in, involved in that process: admins, devs, release managers, the whole gambit. Those are the most successful teams that we see on our platform. And the other big misconception is that you have to do it all at once and adopt everything, something that I spoke about at the start of this talk. So CI/CD, version control, all that testing all at once, and that's false. And what we recommend is starting small and also allowing each part of that process for you to get familiar with it. And that's going to seriously boost the adoption rates for your DevOps processes and allow your team to get on board with this a lot easier. And you're ultimately not going to fail in creating that DevOps process by overloading all at once. So start small, go through each step together as a team, and advance that way. And you'll start to be really successful and notice your quality of life improving when it comes to getting these changes to your end users. Those are the common challenges there. Starting small, plan your DevOps roadmap as well. Pick where you want to start and pick where you want to get to. As I mentioned, version control is usually core part 1, and that might involve getting your simple components into version control first, your custom objects, your Apex classes, Lightning Web Components, etc. That might start there and gradually build what you build into your Git repository, get going and add more over time. Then start to add some automation in, make sure that you have some basic testing, rudimentary testing happening before some more advanced testing, and learn along the way. There's going to be a learning process, and it's not all going to happen all at once, and don't expect it to happen all at once. That's just unrealistic. Learn along the way. There's plenty of resources out there that can help you learn about DevOps. DevOps Launchpad, which is like Trailhead specifically for DevOps. You have, of course, got Trailhead itself, the Trailblazer community. If you're looking at a tool like Gearset, we have the Gearset Academy to become a master with our guided training modules. And don't forget, it's never too early to implement best practice. Don't feel like you should have to wait until you're X size or X complexity to start implementing processes like this. The chances are the more advanced that you get in terms of an organization and the more customization that your org has, the harder it might actually become to implement processes like this, where it's super important to start small, like I say, and build on it if you are a slightly more complex organization. So mapping out your roadmap to success, it could look something like this. So going back to what we said before, the best way to find success is make your journey gradual. And this is what it might look like. This is the stepping stone idea, where you make short incremental changes. So the first step is deciding where your team sits in this maturity matrix. We find that most teams are either at that beginning stage or the novice stage, and typically they'll be using change sets or possibly their own hacked together deployment process, maybe involving some scripts. And then you want to decide where you want to get your team to. So this will likely again be between practitioner and leader. So at these stages, you have source control at the heart of your process. You're using a DevOps solution like Gearset or Capado or any number of roll your own solutions that you might come up with. And you'll be starting to automate some of your processes using CI jobs and automated testing. And you can start making this journey at any time, but it will be gradual, like the stepping stones that we can see outlined here. If you go straight to a mature jump, so if you're currently sitting at novice and want to go to innovator, for example, you're setting yourself up to fail, and you're missing some of the core pillars and processes that you will be looking to achieve and take some learning lessons from. So you'll get your success much faster making small incremental improvements. I know I've said that a lot in this talk already, but that is really where you will be most successful. I know everybody's ambitious these days and wants to shoot for the moon, and that's totally understandable, but doing something like this is what's really going to make you successful. Take it slow, you'll reach your goal, it'll be smooth, and you'll have the whole team bought in as you see that incremental success getting you to real trailblazers in your organizations. So that kind of wraps it up for the presentation. So if we take a quick look at Gearset here. Gearset as a platform has everything that you need to really make you successful in your DevOps processes. What Gearset will allow you to do is, number one, be a drop-in replacement for change sets or your Ant deployment scripts that you currently do. You can use Gearset to compare metadata between any of your chosen source and target locations. So if you're currently having org-to-org processes, you can compare one Salesforce org to another Salesforce org. If you are starting to use version control, you can compare your branches in source control to your orgs or other branches in source control, deploy those to Salesforce DX scratch orgs if that's part of your process already and that's something that you like. And any which way here you can navigate to. If we look at a comparison, this is what Gearset will give you in terms of that granularity of components. You can see here, got some new Apex classes. We got some changed items in here as well. We got a new pick list that we've added some values to. So Gearset will allow you to see those changes at a granular level and build a package really nicely, easily selecting components that you want to take across granularly and move from one environment to the next. Another one of the great things about Gearset, as we think about all the things that we need to make us successful, is that code quality, those kind of tests. Gearset will highlight code issues for you. So you can see here, I've got a couple of best practice issues with the Apex class that I selected to deploy to my org. You'll see here that we've got an automatic fix suggested by Gearset as well. So we can see here that I selected my test Apex class without including the actual Apex class that it's testing. So I can use Gearset to make sure that my deployments are successful and we contain everything in a package that we need to. We can deploy that and integrate it and update our ALM, Jira, for example, here with the deployment notes and everything that we want to be included on that ticket as we update it for our end users and implement it. So everything can be tracked in a system like Gearset. As I mentioned, integrated with all the source control providers that I mentioned a little bit earlier. These are the most common ones that we find. So you can push metadata between those places and make it really easy to do so. You saw that interface that I was just in, where it was really easy to select the components and see line by line differences of what we wanted to deploy. And that will make you really successful in following that clicks not code approach to DevOps by using Gearset is something that we see our users be really successful at, especially admins that don't have that familiarity that developers might when it comes to using command line interfaces or interacting with Git. Gearset has all of that functionality built in to make it smooth and as streamlined as possible. Gearset's automation suite here, automated unit testing to keep an eye on all of your orgs that you are interested in and make sure that you're highlighted if any tests are failing at any time or if you have low code coverage. That's obviously going to be no good. Continuous integration here as well. So you can configure continuous integration jobs to deploy changes automatically from Salesforce orgs to other Salesforce orgs, or of course from your Git repositories to other Salesforce orgs. You can set these up as validations to automatically validate your changes from environment to environment. You can see here that we've got some static code rule sets that you can apply. So all of these core principles that I've been talking about in terms of testing, reliability, and of course, having the flexibility to create a process that makes sense based on your organization's maturity level. Gearset is super flexible and will allow you to do that. Last pillar that we mentioned as well, we've got data backup here as well. So you can see that I've got a couple of backup jobs that are set up so that I can be protected in the event of anything going wrong here. So you can see from my full backup here, I've got this running nicely, and you can see here some pretty standard activity in terms of changes in my org here happening on a day-by-day basis. But this is really important as that last pillar, so that as I'm going about my development, if something accidentally breaks, or if there is some kind of malicious activity, or an API breaks, or a bad bit of code is corrupting my data, or something really catastrophic goes wrong like Permageddon, then I'm protected. So all of this is super important, and Gearset allows you to bring together all of those principles and has the integrations that you need to set up a robust process when it comes to your DevOps strategy. And you'll see if you want to take a look at Gearset, you can start a free trial, book a demo at gearset.com to run through those features in more detail. And the good thing about Gearset is that we are going to be able to help you at any stage of that maturity cycle. So even if you are just using rudimentary change sets at the moment and want to start doing things a little bit better, Gearset can offer some instant value there in terms of giving you some visibility into what's happening and help you mature up that life cycle. If you're already starting to automate or starting to use Git and you have more metadata stored in there, then Gearset is well equipped to handle that and take you up that next step of the maturity cycle to automation and integrations with testing platforms as well. So plenty of things there to offer. If that looks interesting, and hopefully it does, then you can start a free trial, like I say, at any time, or book a demo at gearset.com. You can also drop me an email as well if you want to. I'm Jack M at gearset.com. Feel free to reach out to me. I'm a big fan of LinkedIn, so you'll find me on there too, often sharing best practices and articles about DevOps that are related. So really hope that you've enjoyed this talk and you find something useful to take from it, and I hope to see you all again soon. Thank you very much, and thank you for having me, Apex Hours. It's been an absolute pleasure.